it's great to meet everyone here. I'm not sure if it's afternoon already there, but good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And thanks for inviting me to come and speak here. Let me, I'm going to start by giving you a bit of a background on the Actuarial side of South Africa accreditation. But I would like to thank Irene, because Irene, you did a great job in dealing with a lot of the issues that I would have dealt with, and answering some of the questions that have been asked here that I would have actually dealt with. So thank you very much. I think you've done the job for me. So that's great. That's great from you, Irene. Now, just to give you a bit of history about our Actuarial Society of South Africa education system, we as Actuarial Society of South Africa, for many years, we have always relied on the Institute of Actuaries, and some of our subjects were being delivered through the Institute of Actuaries. So when we then said that we did have our own exams, we started off at fellowship level. And to do that, to actually have the Actuarial side of South Africa exam system, we relied heavily on the universities that deliver actuarial courses. And it is as a result of those universities that an accreditation policy for the Actuarial side of South Africa that should be applied when accrediting universities was developed. So an accreditation policy was developed that is in place. It's important for me to mention that as we then, after a number of years, just more than a decade, with universities accredited, as we go now onto the continent, the accreditation policy is being reviewed, because there are a number of elements that even Irene touched on that need to be reviewed and see how they should be applied as we deal with the rest of the actuarial universities on the continent. So there is actually work happening right now just to look at what elements need to be changed, what elements need to be made easy, just to make sure that accreditation can happen. But the background is that only South African universities were mainly accredited, and I'll touch on that in the next slide. Now, when it comes to the Actuarial Society of South Africa accreditation process, and I'm not going to repeat what Irene has already mentioned, because a lot of there are similarities in a number of things, although there are also differences because of our own accreditation policy. But we have 3 levels of accreditation. We have got level 1, level 2, and level 3. And the requirements for accreditation on these levels differ. There are different requirements for each level. So let's start at level 1. That offers accreditation for 3 subjects, which is your statistics, actuarial statistics, and economics and business finance. Even though we are saying level 1, a university can actually apply for accreditation for 1 subject or 2 subjects or 3 subjects. The requirements for this level are really not, they are not really difficult. They are really straightforward. For example, in the other levels, as the levels increase, like at level 3, for example, we would require at least a fellow to be involved in teaching, whether 20% or 40% of the course content. That's something we know that has been difficult or remains difficult on the African continent, something we have to look at. But level 1, there are no such issues. I think this level can be applied for very easily. If we go to level 2 accreditation, that is the one that covers financial mathematics, which is really the base or the backbone of actuarial. Well, together with actuarial economics, financial mathematics really does introduce a lot of the concepts that are taught. So we have that subject, and then we have got risk modeling and survival analysis, and then we have got contingencies, and then we have got loss reserving and financial engineering as one of the other subjects. And then we introduce, just like the IFOA, we also introduce professionalism at an early stage. So there is the foundation stage, which is foundation actuarial professional practice, which, if offered at a university, is also, this is really a practical subject. It can also be exempted. And then we have got communications. And at this level, would typically request that some of the content is actually taught by a fellow or someone at that level. And the reason for that is that we want to make sure that there is integration of, or there is some professional elements that are brought in through having a fellow who can also deliver the training or the teaching, whilst taking into consideration the actual practice and expectations of the industry. Then we have level 3. Level 3, that's where we would offer accreditation for actuarial risk management and all the other specialist subjects in health, life, general insurance, as well as finance and investments, pensions, which is retirement benefits, enterprise risk management, and banking principles is relatively new. If you look at our accreditation policy, it's not yet in there, but if there is a university that would offer that, then that would still fall under level 3. So these are the level of accreditation. And the point to repeat here is you can apply on a subject by subject basis as well, depending on your coverage. And some of the issues that Irene has spoken about are the issues we really look at. There are a lot of things Irene put there as the requirements, that the university must be teaching an actuarial science product, the program, and must have commitment in the long-term success and sustainability of that program. There must be also some element of research that happens, and the university must also be participating in some of the industry associations if there is. It's not like if you're not doing, you don't get accreditation, but it's something we would encourage a great deal. So there are a number of things that we would expect. You just need to commit and then work toward doing that. It doesn't stop accreditation per se, but it is something we would expect should happen. And there is also need, for engagement of the university with the industry, because we know the value of industry in terms of making sure that programs become or remain sustainable. It doesn't stop accreditation, but again, we do try and encourage that happens. So these are the levels and these are the subjects, and you'd find that a lot of these subjects are very similar to the subjects being offered by the Institute of Faculty of Actuaries. Same syllabus, especially level 1 and level 2, really same syllabus in most cases. So when you cover IFOA, you are also actually covering ASSA. And at one point, I'll also mention at this stage is to say that we also, would encourage universities to, when they are accrediting, they can accredit with multiple bodies, because obviously it is important to give options to students after they have completed their program. Some of the things we would expect is that there should be a person who is an accreditation actuary, or if it's not an actuary, let's say a professor, they will represent the university in terms of accreditation. And this person is responsible for then recommending within the standard agreed with ASSA, recommending exemptions. So universities don't offer exemptions, you just get accreditation. And then you would recommend and say, these students, because of this mark that they've reached in terms of our agreement with you, qualify for exemptions. And those students then apply for exemptions on their own. Another point I would like to mention here is also that even though we have got accreditation, students themselves, if a university is not accredited, if they were then come and want to write the exams through ASSA, they can actually apply for exemptions on their own. It's just that the work is a lot more. That's why we really favor accreditation, and we are really supporting universities so that they get accredited, because students on their own, they have to submit all the information about the university and justify why the subject should actually be accredited, and a whole lot of work that students have to go through, which is very discouraging. But you still can apply for exemptions from a university that is not accredited if you need to get those exemptions and you think you actually qualify for those exemptions. You just need to motivate it. Now, if okay, my slides, okay, they're not moving. Just the process very quickly. In terms of submission of the accreditation application, we would engage the university. They prepare the application. There are some forms to be completed. It is good to have done subject mapping just to make sure that you're covering at least 80% of what is required. And sometimes we find that the way the curriculum may be set up for a university, the one subject may not actually cover everything, but it could be that 2 or 3 combined subjects do cover whatever is required in terms of coverage for the full subject that you're applying for. It simply means you need to indicate that actually it's taught in the course in these different subjects. So in completing the application forms, those are some of the things you would include. Then when you have submitted your application, there is an accreditation panel that is then appointed to assess your submission. But even before you submit, you can engage ASSA, you can discuss. And I think Shaheen from Makerere University in Uganda has spoken already that they are going through the process. There can be a level of engagement just to make sure that the application is complete. So the accreditation panel, once it has looked at your application, they prepare a report and with some recommendations on the accreditation. And during the process, when the panel is assessing your application, there is engagement with the university. If there is anything to beef up the application or any other information required, whether exam papers, the curriculum, the syllabus that needs to be submitted, all of that will come through the engagement if it hasn't been submitted. The report is then forwarded from the education panel to an accreditation committee. So panels, different universities can actually have allocated different panels, but the accreditation committee is one committee that then looks at the work of the accreditation panel and then make a recommendation to the education board. The education board is one of the boards that reports into council. So Council of Actuarial Science of South Africa, where I actually sit as a council member at the moment, and I sit on the education board. So the education board then looks at the recommendations and comments made by the accreditation committee and then make a decision. When that decision is made, then communication is then made to the university and any accreditation panel recommendations. It could be that there will be recommendations that are made that you probably need to address over the next year or 2 years or 3 years. So approval may still be given, and then any gaps identified, you are then requested to have a look at those so that you can reach to the standard that we need. So you may still get accreditation with the recommendations on things that you need to do. The accreditation itself is granted for 5 years. When it's granted for five years, there are midterm reviews. So midterm review is at 2.5 years, and it's meant to check if there were any changes in programs, staff, the way you teach, syllabus, and all sorts of things, how you have addressed the issues to make sure that you remain in line with the accreditation requirements. And there is a full-term review at 5 years, which is really the same as the midterm review, but the full-term review will really be re-accrediting you, also looking at the same issues that need to be done. If there are major changes in between before any of these midterm reviews, you may need to communicate and just say, we have made these changes so that the Actuarial Society remains aware of what is happening at your university, if there is any advice or help that you may need. And that's so that's really the process that one needs to follow. So it's really sitting down as a university, think that you want to be accredited, think of the subject you need to be accredited, and then start with the process. It may take a bit long from your side as a university to go through the process and actually then get accredited. I've already mentioned that students from non-accredited universities can apply for exemptions individually, obviously with motivation, but this is something we actually also want to reduce so that students don't have to do that. Now, I want to go to the next slides, and those touch on some of the issues we will discuss at the panel discussion. So I won't need to bring these slides again, but let me go to the next slides, hopefully within the time. Okay, right. Now, these slides, I've presented them 2 weeks ago at the Africa seminar at the Actuarial Society of South Africa convention, where I said, let's look at the current state of accreditation on the African continent at universities. So South Africa, there were only 4 universities accredited. Now there are 7 universities within South Africa, because the education system relies heavily on the universities delivering the earlier subjects, and then those are the people who then join the actuarial side of South Africa. Then outside South Africa, we only have University of Nairobi. I know Professor Weke is here. I'll be seeing you, Professor, in the next 2 weeks, 2 or 3 weeks at the task convention. But the University of Nairobi is accredited, and for a long time they've been accredited for 2 subjects, which is part level 1. And the progress to level 2 accreditation is work in progress at the University of Nairobi. And we really hope that that process can be completed so that we can have the university accredited at level 2. It may end up being that the University of Nairobi may only choose subject level 2, but we hope that this should be obtained. And this is one of the reasons we are also reviewing accreditation policy, because there are a few things, since it was made for South Africa at the time when we were starting, there are a few things that may cause obstacles that are being re-looked at. If you look at other universities in different countries on the continent, they are all at various stages of preparation for accreditation. And Makerere Shahin has already mentioned that they're in that process. We've got another university that's also going through the same process, which is a National Institute of Science and Technology in Zimbabwe. They were previously accredited with the Institute of Actuaries, probably the only African university that was accredited then in 1995. And you'll be glad to hear that I was the first student to do the Actuarial Science product, one of the first to do the Actuarial Science product at that university. We benefited from the exemption, exemptions, but that exemption was lost subsequently, I think after some 10 years or so. But they are now coming back to be accredited. And I think they qualify at level 2, actually, because that university has produced a lot of actuaries. I think if you look at it, a lot of Zimbabwean actuaries, they came from the National Institute of Science and Technology, apart from those who did their degrees in South Africa or the UK. A lot of them came from NAST, from NAST. Now, with this current state, the implications are that there is slow progress towards qualification by students. And I think Irene has mentioned this in different words when she was presenting. And this usually at a higher cost, some now have to repeat, and all sorts of things they would have gotten exemptions in. And that may lead to loss of interest to progress further as other responsibilities for these students increase over time. You start taking up responsibilities. Some of them, students are young, and then they get married, and then there are a whole lot of things happen. And then even at work, some responsibilities start to increase. And then there might even be loss of interest, which potentially leads to actuaries or actuarial professionals being lost to other industries. Yet we need to continue attracting, even at a global level, actuarial professionals that we keep within the process. And then I think Irene mentioned this as well. People then migrate, to other countries to do their studies. Sometimes they even change from actuarial science. We lose potentially good actuarial professionals. And then the other implication is that we've got a reduced pipeline of future actuaries because of some of these issues that I've just mentioned. So this is a problem. This is an issue as we try to develop actuarial education on the African continent. Irene, you have mentioned some of the benefits of actuarial education. We really look at actuarial education by universities as very beneficial. For example, increased demand. If your university is accredited, you'll have increased demand of actuarial programs from students, and the attention of students when they are studying and the effort they put will also increase, because they want to get those exemptions, since there are minimum standards for them to get exemptions. And if you get those exemptions, typically there is faster progress towards qualification. Average period anywhere from, I think the average period to qualification is really about 5.5 years after graduating. We've got some guys who really nail it within 3 years, they finish exams. Obviously, without sufficient experience, they can't be called fellows. They have to wait for the 3 years experience that we have. But there is faster progress. That's what we have seen. That also we've experienced for students coming from accredited universities. And yeah, we can then have an increased pipeline of future actuaries and also potentially retain actuarial professionals who could have left, because as they qualify, we hope that, as actuaries qualify, as the industry also recognize that there are a number of actuaries qualifying, work should start to happen or be created for those qualified actuaries or near qualified actuaries within the markets in which we operate. And then accreditation just increases alignment of university actuarial programs with professional exams, which is great. And it would lead, because of the process we put in place and the requirements of 80% syllabus coverage, it leads to improved actuarial syllabus at universities for practical relevance. We have seen universities that say they're offering actuarial science, they call it actuarial. When you look at it, it's not, it doesn't really help a student. When they start writing professional exams, they realize it's a different ballgame altogether because the university syllabus was not covering what was intended. Accreditation can help with that alignment. And it will also improve with improve quality of actuarial teaching and research, because we as you interact with the association, with the Actuarial Society of South Africa, or even the Institute and Faculty of Actuaries, naturally that interaction should lead to improved quality. And then the increased oversight should lead to increased credibility of a university that's offering actuarial programs, which is a great thing that we expect should happen. Challenges that we typically find with universities is we have been engaging a number of universities on the African continent, limited resources to actually undertake the work required towards accreditation. And then where fellows might be required, difficult to employ full-time fellows to meet accreditation requirement policies, which is why we are actually reviewing our policy at ASSA that was initially meant for South African universities, because this is a big problem on the continent. You can't have that. It's just not practical. We don't have the resources. I think Irene mentioned that. There's also been high staff turnover, and that lack of stability does affect the accreditation credentials of a university. And then limited track record to meet higher levels of accreditation. Some universities that are studying, there may be limited track record for the teaching that they are doing. For us, we expect that the program must have been taught for at least 2 years. So a newly established program, teach it for 2 years, then you can start applying for accreditation, which can be a challenge for some universities. I think most of them have been teaching for a very long period, which is great. And some programs, like I mentioned earlier, would need to be upgraded. They may not meet the professional exam requirements, which means their students may then struggle to progress. And that is a challenge that is faced by other students. And I commend the University of Makerere for aligning their program with the IFOA, the ASSA, and I think in the University of Nairobi is the same. And a few other universities on the continent have aligned their syllabuses with the professional syllabuses. Now, when we have these challenges, what are some of the solutions? I think it would be good for universities to coordinate, cooperate, and try and standardize actuarial syllabuses. And then industry is extremely important. It will be important for industry to really contribute towards supplementing remuneration of lecturers, to reduce staff turnover that we see for stability, because that affects the credentials for accreditation, because we want to maintain the standards that we expect at a professional level. And local associations should really be involved in assisting local universities get exemptions. So whoever becomes president, secretary general, or secretary of associations needs to put this as an agenda item. It is a solution so that you help these universities to get accreditation. Senior actuaries in a number of countries needs to be involved. There are some actuaries employed in most of the African countries, African continent. The Actuarial Society of South Africa, we have a large pool of fellows that you can draw upon if you need help, and it's something we are very keen to assist. And there are a lot of people who have put hands up. And then accreditation policies of major actuarial associations need to be reviewed. And I see the IFOA, doing a great job there. Any other association, whether in the US or whether it's ASSA, we need to review accreditation policies so that it becomes easier for universities to apply. So those are some of the solutions that may be implemented. Now, with that, I say, let me see. Okay, I say there is an accreditation policy that is in place at the Actuarial Society of South Africa. Level 1, a lot of the issues in the policies are easily achievable, which means the 3 subjects at least help. And universities, if they apply for at least the first 3 subjects or even 4 subjects, because you can also do on a subject by subject basis, it helps you to get a feel of what accreditation means, and you can work towards increasing the number of subjects. So application can happen on a piecemeal basis, but the starting point is get accredited, have a feel of what it is. As you go, you start getting accredited on a subject by subject basis as you go, and that's quite important. And from that, and not to take time doing presentation, but more questions and discussion, I will end here. Thank you very much. There's a question in the chat box.
Yeah.
Does ASSA have a significant number of fellows working outside of South Africa? And then question 2 was, what are the benefits to ASSA accreditation over IFOA for university outside of South Africa? Okay, so does ASSA have a significant number of fellows working outside South Africa? So yes, ASSA does have, and a lot of actuaries. So let's look at who does employ actuaries. It's a number of multinational organizations or organizations that operate in different jurisdictions. So typically you will find fellows from the Actuarial Society of South Africa being involved outside South Africa a great deal. So all the major insurance companies that you find that actuarial ASSA members get involved. Some consulting companies that are doing work on the African continent in different countries, you find that ASSA fellows are actually being involved. ASSA actually has got a membership category that is called affiliate membership. It also has overseas membership. So it also has a number of fellows, not significant even in the UK, that are still ASSA members getting involved in those countries. If we come to the second question, the benefits to ASSA. So we will tell you that this is part of a strategy. It is actually a broader strategy approved by the Actuarial Society of South Africa Council, that in the public interest, we need to get involved significantly in the development of actuarial education on the African continent. And that is in the public interest. Public interest because we need to make sure that there is increased supply of actuaries in the market. A lot of solutions may remain unresolved because there might be this view that we do not have actuaries or professionals. So the benefits to ASSA, it's really, we are doing this in the public interest. We're not driving, so it's not a commercial element or trying to drive membership or anything. In fact, we've got a memorandum of mutual recognition agreement with the Institute of Actuaries and other global organizations around the world. And so whether you do a program with ASSA and qualify, you can still end up being a fellow of the Institute of Actuaries through a mutual recognition agreement and other requirements that you may need to meet. So for ASSA, public interest, we need to do this. It's something that needs to happen. I think it's something I've discussed with some representatives of SOA and Irene. I think we have actually spoken about this as well. The benefits to ASSA is to see actuarial education developing. So that's why we're saying accreditation should happen. Over IFOA, we are partners with IFOA. So we are partners with IFOA. And in fact, what the actuarial program is really, really similar in a way. Only at fellowship level, the fellowship applications is where you tend to have some, and then that one we don't offer any accreditation anyway if it's applications. But then you've got some bit of a localized, kind of localized to look at the environment in Africa and also in South Africa. Then there is another question by Catherine. I understand that the University of Nairobi is ASSA accredited for 2 papers. What's the process of getting exemption from the papers on individual basis after the master's program? Okay, I hope I understood this question. So accrediting programs does not necessarily look at what level. So you might be offering an honors degree, undergraduate, and doing actuarial subject that cover the right coverage, you get accredited in that level. If you are doing a master's and you're still doing the right coverage, you still get exemptions at that level. So the process of getting exemptions, let's say for University of Nairobi, is that there must be recommendation that you qualify for exemptions, and then that recommendation is what you use to apply to us and say, I've been recommended for exemption, let me apply for exemption. But let's hope that as we are working with University of Nairobi, they will get more subjects accredited and hopefully also even apply to the IFOA so that you actually have got 2 choices, so that people actually have choices, or even apply to SOA. But we are simply saying you get appointed. There is an accreditation personnel at a university. After your exam, they say these students have met the requirements, they qualify for exemptions. It comes to when you apply, you present that information.